Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. The IBF mandatory challenger Kubrat Pulev has signalled he might be willing to take step aside from Anthony Joshua if it is in fact offered. And this is a perceptible shift from the Bulgarian contender, who until this point has been adamant it's his shot with Joshua or bust. And that's been the rhetoric in recent months, also from his co-promoter Bob Arum. But until now, and there still hasn't been an offer, Kubrat Pulev has been not willing to talk about step aside. But talking to Dan Raphael from BoxingScene.com, he was asked the question, what if a deal to step aside was offered? And he stated, I'm ready for this fight against Joshua, so I don't know. Nobody knows. I want this fight. When somebody comes to me and tells me something and offers me something, maybe. I don't know. But I want this fight. I'm ready for this fight, and I believe this fight will happen this year. I've waited a long time for this fight with Anthony Joshua. I'm the long-time mandatory for this fight, but I'm open for talking. No problem. But I want this fight. That's it. That's Kubrat Pulev, his statements to BoxingScene.com. So the door just left ajar there to the possibility of step aside, which until this point has not been offered. And that's because it was meant to be Anthony Joshua's next fight, originally scheduled for June, and then if Joshua won, potentially he would move on to his other mandatory in the WBO, Alexander Usyk. But there's been a lot of talk about an undisputed fight bubbling up in recent weeks, and most of it has seemed very pie in the sky, that with two contracted fights, one for Joshua, one for Wilder, that it was just not possible. But if Pulev is willing to consider some sort of offer, and not saying he accepts anything, but if he did consider something, and on the basis that he did take it, that would increase the odds of an undisputed fight happening quite a bit, because if you've got two roadblocks in the way, then it's probably not going to happen. But if you take one of them away, then it just comes down to the other fight. And if Deontay Wilder, who has been injured following his rematch on February the 22nd, if he was to accept a big offer for step aside, then obviously it would open the door for the fight happening. At this point, there's been no indication Deontay Wilder is willing to do that. But what if he's not ready for a third fight with Tyson Fury whenever the pandemic is over and that big-time boxing can resume? And actually, who knows when that could actually happen? There's been signals that potentially Wilder Fury 3 would be 2021 because they'd want a crowd. They'd want to maximize the gate because it made almost $17 million in revenue the second time around. So even if Pulev was willing to accept step aside, it's probably contingent on Wilder doing the same, because they're probably not just going to pay Pulev and then the fight doesn't come off and Joshua has to either just fight him or go on to his next mandatory, which would be Alexander Usyk. But there would be a few other peripheral issues to consider as well. You have Alexander Usyk. He's potentially going to be fighting Derek Chisora at some point later in the year. They were meant to have fought this month in May, but obviously it was postponed. Would he be able to pull out of that fight to face Anthony Joshua, or would he continue just to go on his course and have that scheduled fight with Chisora? But also on the Fury side, I'm sure if Deontay Wilder wasn't ready to face Fury for a third time because of injury, or he decides to take step aside, you would have the WBC mandatory Dillian Whyte saying, hang on, it's my time. Anthony Joshua can wait. It's Fury's got to face me. He can't be going off facing anyone else. You can bet your bottom dollar right now that would be the stance from Dillian Whyte. He's already come out with that sort of rhetoric in recent weeks as well. So it's one of these situations. It's like a mythical sort of unicorn, the undisputed fight. We haven't seen it in basically 20 years, so a generation. And it's one of these things we've been talking about forever and a day, the last sort of 3 years or so. And just when it comes to potentially, coming into view, it could come to fruition. It's snatched away. And it seemed to me, at least, until these Pulev comments, that it just wasn't feasible, at least for another 12 to 18 months. You've got to have boxing back. You've got to have Joshua and Fury beating their next opponents. And then maybe you can talk about it. But Pulev just cracking the door open a little bit. Sometimes, maybe it would just lead to an avalanche of all of a sudden things happen quite quickly. We just don't know. But it is a perceptible shift from Kubrat Pulev. So while he was saying, I want this fight, it's my time, I want this fight, he also said, if someone offers me something, maybe. So the door is ajar. This is new. It is news. It was a little bit from left field because he's been so adamant that Joshua is next or bust. But maybe he's looking at the situation as, well, maybe I can clip the ticket twice here. He could maybe demand several $1 million to have the step aside and still get a shot later on. But there's no guarantees anything comes to fruition. But maybe they're looking to just test the waters here for what a potential step aside offer could look like. Because if it's, a couple 100,000, maybe $1 million or two, they'll just laugh in their face and say, thanks, but no thanks. But if it's considerably more, and remembering Kubrat Pulev, was well paid for his shot against Klitschko. I know some people have said that Kubrat Pulev has never really been well paid in his career. That's false. He's had a number of 7-figure paydays, so he isn't short on money. And if it is a small offer, he's probably just going to turn it down. But they're obviously open to hearing what it could look like. But then you have to look at the Wilder side and go, is Wilder going to willingly step aside, even if it was for 10, 20, $30 million? Who knows? It would probably be dependent on what money someone somewhere else could come up with. Say if there was a site fee offer of $100 million from Saudi Arabia, for example, $30 million might be needed of that for step aside for Wilder to get him out of the picture. It does potentially free up a few moves to be made and discussions to be had, but I think we just need to keep our expectations in check. But it was a little from left field, I must say, from Pulev. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.